With Reese Fisher.
And I'm Nolan Fisher.
Speaking of Nolan, what we were doing today is director Christopher Nolan. To be clear, Nolan's full name is Nolan Christopher Fisher. You were named after him, right?
Yes, I was born in 1995 to cinephile parents who, despite the fact that Christopher Nolan had not even released a short film at this point, they knew. Due to some like Fermi paradox time travel stuff, they knew. So that's where it all comes from. I am my own grandfather. I named myself. That's what we're getting at here.
I was hoping you would say something like that.
It'll come up more later, but yeah. I went back in time, named myself because I like these movies.
So, in introducing, I almost said Nolan Christopher. In introducing Christopher Nolan, I wanted to read a poem that sort of gets at the heart of some of his themes and his overall films. This is Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The wise men at their end know dark is right. Because their words had forked no lightning they, do not go gentle into that good night. Good men the last wave by, crying how bright. Their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay, rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now, with your fierce tears I pray, do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So this poem plays prominence in one of his movies, which we will get into, but figured that was a decent opening to, his filmography. So let's get into it.
Kind of comes up thematically. I mean, Christopher Nolan is perhaps one of, if not just the most well-known directors of the 21st century. Doing a Batman trilogy, making 3 other massively huge hitting blockbusters. He's come to kind of redefine the blockbuster, or at least be the pioneer of a certain type of blockbuster movie in this century. But before we get into all of his big movies, we'll start with his slightly more humble beginnings. So Christopher Nolan is an English fella who, I suppose, wanted to make films from a very young age, shooting them on a little 8mm camera. Eventually, he would make a couple of very small, relatively unknown short films before finally getting together just a little bit of money and trying to shoot a feature-length movie called Following, which, as far as I know, was shot on like weekends and stuff. Like it was just one of those movies where it took like months and months to film. Just because the budget of the movie was something like $5,000. Just a no-budget movie, written by Nolan, directed by Nolan, produced by Nolan, edited by Nolan, shot by, this is just like a movie completely made by this guy. I don't know how popular it is currently. I think it probably has some kind of cult following, but the plot of the movie is very straightforward. It's about this thief who just likes stealing, and it kind of goes through his short time as a criminal as he learns from a master thief until through a very convoluted plot of blackmail and murder and stealing, he's eventually betrayed by his mentor and left to be caught by the police. You have not seen Following, correct?
This is the only movie by him I have not seen. Correct.
Yeah, it's barely a movie. Like, it's 70 minutes long. It's very short, so it's very easy to watch. It has a lot of elements to it that are similar to like a Hitchcock movie or a Polanski movie. Shot entirely in black and white, and it's shot on film. Shooting on film is going to be something that Nolan would be eventually become even more well known for as it becomes less and less frequently done, especially at the blockbuster level. As for the legacy of this movie, like I said, I don't know how popular it is. Obviously, it made very little money when it came out because it's just some little, neo-noir crime thriller type thing. Yeah, I don't have too much more to say about this one. Just a humble independent movie that put Nolan on the map. I think it did well at maybe one film festival, and that was enough for financial backers to pick him up later or to find who he was and start trying to work with him.
I assume our movie that we inevitably shoot will be done in a similar capacity, just on weekends or what have you. Or if
Probably, hopefully.
One of us is out of work at the time or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. This movie was done with an extreme amount of detail paid to rehearsals. So they rehearsed everything extensively beforehand. So they only did the shooting like it took them like one or two takes to get everything. So there's definitely some luck involved with it, with being able to actually assemble the thing.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of like going from nothing to something as a filmmaker, this is like, the desired blueprint.
Do we? Oh yeah, I didn't mean to say that ours would be like as successful or not. I more so meant I imagined the sort of idea behind it in the shooting and planning of it. Do we want to just walk through sort of like each movie with the years first and then go through them slowly? Or do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay.
That one I just wanted to get out of the way because I
knew
you hadn't seen it. Most people haven't seen it. It's much less interesting than the rest because it's barely even a feature-length movie. It's kind of like a proof of concept that he knew how to technically make a movie before he even became, a director or moved to Hollywood or anything.
Before we go through all of his movies, do we want to give like a bit of background about him? I know you said that he was British as well, but I mean, I have a few things written down, not too much. But
yeah, go for it. Other than knowing that like he loved 2001: A Space Odyssey and Star Wars, like I don't know anything about what he did before he was a filmmaker.
Okay.
I think vaguely he might have worked on like big corporate commercial videos or industrial films or something.
Yeah, I don't think he ever was an actor, but he may, yeah. But he also has a brother, Jonathan Nolan, who is a writer on a few of his movies as well. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that'll come up.
I mean, I don't have a ton to say about his background. I more so wanted to also say about shooting on film. He continued to shoot on film for most of his movies, but then all of his movies are also released in IMAX. And I believe he didn't start shooting on IMAX cameras per se, but he sort of started to make it more popular, I guess you could say. Additionally, like some of his common themes that are explored that I really enjoy throughout his movies is the duality of man. He doesn't really have a whole. Actually, I don't think he has any movies with a female lead. That's why I say
No.
That's why I say the duality of man. Um, that's something that we will talk about as well. But he doesn't really know how to have uh strong female characters. Either write them in or direct them. I'm not sure where that goes awry for him, but it goes awry somewhere. Just mentioning that now. So yeah, duality of man. Uh, how to face loss is certainly explored. The transcendence of love, and then also like just transcending time, thought, and space is explored. I say thought as well because, yeah, depending on which movie you're talking about, he is trying to grapple with that idea, like how do we make something last? How do we make our humanity last? And how do we not, I guess, lose ourselves to the world or just to death in general? Do you want me to walk through each of his movies, or do you want to do that?
Up to you. There's only 11 of them, so
I can do that. So The Following came out in 1998, as Nolan said. Then there's Insomnia in 2002, which is a remake. Oh,
there's
I'm
Mementos.
sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't finish this list after
Had
school.
had
I
one job.
already cucked it up. Memento came out in 2001 or 2000.
2000.
2000. So Memento came out in 2000. Nolan is starting to get upset. Egregious error. Memento came out in 2000. Insomnia came out in 2002. Batman Begins came out in 2005. The Prestige came out in 2006. The Dark Knight 2008. The Dark Knight Rises, or sorry, Inception in 2010. The Dark Knight Rises in 2012. Interstellar in 2014. Dunkirk in 2017. Tenet in 2020. And Oppenheimer is going to be coming out in 2023 in July. So we figured this would be a decent time to cover, Christopher Nolan, given that we really enjoyed his movies, and he's going to be having one that comes out this summer. So I guess going back to the forgotten Memento. My mistake. My apologies once again.
Unforgivable. Yeah, so Memento is a psychological thriller, I guess you'd call it. Has a lot of noir elements to it. Starring Guy Pearce, Carrie-Anne Moss, and Joe Pantoliano. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Pantoliano.
Oh God. Okay.
The fella from The Matrix who plays one of the villains in the first movie.
And The Sopranos.
Yes, he's also in some of The Sopranos. Obviously, Carrie-Anne Moss also in The Matrix. But yeah, this movie is quite unique because it starts at the end and moves back to the beginning, so it has a very non-linear structure. The screenplay is brilliant. There's a bunch of edited. Well, the main thing that makes it kind of a noir, neo-noir movie is that in between every scene, as time moves backward from the end to the beginning, there's him on the phone, which ends up being him talking to himself. So yeah, this in terms of you describing his movies is having somewhat of a motif of duality. The duality in this one is mostly just that this guy lies to himself. Um, so this outside of just having a non-linear structure, um, it also has a twist ending. The twist being that the guy you've been watching all along is actually the villain of the movie, and you don't know that. He's just a psychopathic murderer who lies to himself. Um, Kind of the bit of the movie is this man can't create new memories due to an accident that happened to him in a robbery years in the past. And so the plot follows him trying to avenge his wife's death and find the killer. And since he can't form new memories, he tattoos messages to himself, trying to give himself hints about who the murderer is. But at the end of the movie, like at runtime end of the movie, we discover that he already killed his wife's attacker. But it turned out that his wife's attacker did not kill her. She actually survived the accident and then died later because he killed her by giving her a lethal dose of insulin because he forgot or she let him. I don't remember if it's made clear. Um, but yeah, it's a great movie, kind of about a man's inability to deal with grief, and it's unclear if his inability to deal with grief is what causes him to become psychopathic, or if it's just who he is, or the reaction to not having new memories. Um, but yeah, it's a really interesting examination of memory, meta narrative of film structure, grief, um, self reliance, and self deception. Um, yeah, what do you think about Memento?
I have seen it, I think, twice and desperately need to see it like 4 more times. Given that my ability to absorb information from a movie is extremely low, because I think I've said this before, but I get super caught up in the emotional impact that a story and the characters and like everything, like sort of like the atmosphere have on it. Um, but this movie is really really awesome. It kind of asserts at a certain point that the narrator is unreliable, or at least the person you are following around could potentially be unreliable, which I'm usually a big fan of. And the nonlinear narrative is done really well, to the point where it's actually doing something more than just kind of being like a shtick that the movie's like, oh yeah, it's gonna run backwards and you're gonna like it. Like there's a reason for that, which might bring up a larger discussion about Christopher Nolan, in that his beauty he's able to create and his stronger movies typically are more simple, not in concept, but maybe in concept. Like he has some pretty high concept ideas, but I think he gets sort of caught up in the maybe use of technology, not even technicalities of it, but gets a little bit convoluted, I guess, as he's gone on as a filmmaker. Um, yeah, I think there are some solid performances in this. The visuals as well, like Guy Pearce's body being tattooed plays like a prominent feature in it, which is just very intriguing in and of itself. Like just looking at someone's tattoos over and over again, and you're like as intrigued as he is in discovering it. You're like, wait, what the hell is that? Like, what does that say? So that kind of makes you look at tattoos as something different. But yeah, this movie makes you question your reality. It makes you question what, or at least it should make you question, what are you lying to yourself about? As you said, self-deception. And it's just a great movie to make you think, and it has a pretty short runtime.
It's like almost 2 hours long. It's like a pretty
Oh,
normal runtime.
what the hell? I thought it was an hour and a half.
No, it's like an hour 50, some hour 53.
I don't think I can say anything about this movie that's going to be right then, because I just keep
Don't know
messing this up. No, I skipped over it because I had the list down and there was one other movie I needed to write down and it was this one.
Yeah, it's one of those movies where like, so it was written by him and his brother Jonathan. Um, they like they did some long cross country trip, and I think Jonathan Nolan had written the story like as a short story, and then he pitched it to him as a movie when they were doing this cross country trip, and then Chris Nolan had moved to the West Coast. Jonathan Nolan was living on the East Coast. And I think they spent a couple of years writing it back and forth just by like email correspondence or something.
Damn.
And eventually came up with like the full fleshed out story.
That's
So
awesome.
I think Jonathan Nolan basically wrote the story and Christopher Nolan turned it into the reverse order thing as a movie. And I think that's a pretty good representation of how they would go on to work later because they worked together pretty well, and quite a few of his movies were written by Jonathan Nolan. Um, as for the actual crafting of this thing, I think the screenplay is genius. Like it's just an instant masterpiece from a writing perspective, and I think those like pre-production directorial decisions of cutting it up the way it is also brilliant, but some of the execution parts in filming it make the film feel a little amateurish. Um, so I think I wrote somewhere that it's like a masterpiece directed by a semi-pro. So like you could tell that this guy just has an eye, like he has a clear vision. Just needed to work out some of the kinks somewhere in there. Um, like there are just elements of this movie that feel a little raw, and even though the story itself is raw and they're supposed to be in there, they're just like there's just a few shots of like them in the bar where I'm like, why does it look like that? Like things are kind of out of frame at times. Like they're just weird scenes. Um, but it's incredibly well written and it's definitely like masterfully edited together. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Um, I think you could also probably mention that I could be wrong about this, but I seem to recall the point in time when you first saw this that I think it had a pretty profound impact on your understanding of movies, but also your interest in them.
Oh yeah, I saw this at a point where I was just watching like 4 movies a day. So then it probably would have been one of, if not just my favorite movies.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I just hadn't seen another movie like that. So, um, in that sense, it definitely like blew my mind when I watched it in, like, early high school or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have any more to say. The only other thing I would say is if you don't want some good movies ruined, um, probably stop listening right now and go watch Christopher Nolan's filmography.
Yeah, I mean that he's only made what 10, 12 movies, and 7 of them are huge blockbusters. So if you haven't seen those, like I don't care about spoiling them. And this movie's 20 years old, and infamous. So I also like this is one of those movies that it would be on every list of movies with great twists. This
Yeah.
twist isn't what you think it is. You know that
Well, that was kind
that
of
kind of
why I was saying that is because there are a number of movies he has that the whole crux of the movie doesn't depend on the twist, but obviously the first time you watch it, you don't want to know the twist. That being said, my favorite movie on that he has made, it was ruined and it didn't really matter to me.
yeah. This I mean the twist in this movie that he already got his vengeance but intentionally chose to forget is inconsequential to the fact that the entire narrative was a lie. So it's more like a deconstruction of the way that a narrative chooses to lie to you to reveal more information which is supposed to be emotionally destabilizing once you learn it.
Yeah, I was going to mention the meta narrative piece, which is something that he does in a number of his movies. And the movies he does the meta narrative in, for the most part, are the ones that I like the most.
I think it's just present in all of his movies.
To some degree, yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I just appreciate that he has a meta narrative happening. He has the literal story, and then obviously like the figurative piece. So not only are his movies very layered in that capacity, but then also just with all the other shit that's happening as well. Yeah. Sorry, I feel like we could talk technically about his movies for a while, but
yeah, most of the interesting technical aspects of this one just come from the writing and the screenplay structure.
mm-hmm.
It's been dissected to death, so I don't have too much more to add.
Right.
This movie was a small budget. It was like 9 million, and I think it made like 40 mil. Yeah, cost 9, made 40. So it was a small movie and made enough money.
Made a good profit for a guy's second movie, yeah.
So at that point, I think producers were starting to be like, "Oh shit, this guy's got vision, so we can get him to make us a ton of money." But with only one real movie under his belt, they weren't going to give him hundreds of millions to make, blockbusters yet. So they gave him a movie called Insomnia, which is a 2002 crime movie.
So they gave him Robin Williams teamed up with Al Pacino and, and Hilary Swank.
He got Robin Williams for the movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So he was like, "Hey, Robin, I got Al Pacino. Do you want in on this?"
No, he just worked with the casting director to get Robin Williams because he saw something in Robin Williams that other people didn't, I guess. I don't know.
From like Good Will Hunting or something? I don't know.
I have no idea.
Either way, it like I remember when I found out this movie existed and was like Al Pacino and Robin Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just such an odd pairing, but it's cool to see. Like it's cool to see them interacting together because yeah, it's not really actors that you would consider to ever be in the same set.
Yeah, so this is a remake of a Norwegian movie with the same name that had only come out a few years prior.
Such an odd choice.
Yeah, I mean, this one is the least Christopher Nolan of his movies. Like in general, his movies have a very distinct visual style, writing style, musical choices that put them all into just like, yep, that's a Christopher Nolan movie for sure. This one is just like a crime movie made by Christopher Nolan. Like it feels like a movie that was like kind of designed ahead of time before he joined it. He didn't have anything really to do with. Yeah,
I could see this being directed by like Taylor Sheridan or something like that. Like it's not generic per se, but yeah, like a number of people could have
Jonathan Demme was he was supposed to do it first.
I don't know who that is.
He directed Sounds of the Lambs.
Oh, okay. Makes
some
sense.
other stuff.
Why? I wonder why he turned that down. Interesting.
That's Hollywood, baby.
Yeah, I mean this movie is odd that it's a remake of a movie that came out like a few years prior, and also like the movie that came out wasn't bad. Like the original is pretty good as well.
Oh yeah, I prefer the original. It's got Stellan Skarsgård in it.
Mm-hmm.
He's phenomenal in it.
Yeah, he's a beast.
Yeah, I mean, if if Memento is like a movie that's like just 1 or 2 steps away from being, an instant classic masterwork, this is just like a pretty good movie. Maybe close to great, but like it's just kind of like a straightforward murder mystery, where the hook is that the protagonist can't sleep because he's in Alaska where it's light all the time. But basically, that's the plot. Al Pacino goes to Alaska to solve a murder of a teenage girl, and he starts to have difficulty sleeping. And then when they're chasing the killer, there's like some fog, and because he gets mixed up with the fog and the sleepiness, Al Pacino shoots his own partner.
Mm-hmm.
And then between his insomnia and his grief, he slowly loses his mind. Um, Plot twist, turns out Robin Williams is the killer. He plays a pretty compelling villain in this one. But basically, he just like solves the crime, and then there's some pedophilia business, and then um, he shoots him.
Yeah, the end of the movie, like the end is fine, but I do remember like thinking back on it like a few days later, and I was like, how did Christopher Nolan make this movie and like Memento and like all of his other movies? Like, not that the ending was bad, I just assumed it would be different, but maybe the ending, I don't know.
I mean,
I,
they kill each other. Like Al Pacino shoots Robin Williams, and Robin Williams shoots him.
yeah, so in that case, it's kind of less than satisfying.
I like it well enough, but it feels very generic relative to something exciting like Memento.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
I've always viewed this one as like the studio required stepping stone.
Right.
So like obviously Nolan was like, I've got an idea for a Batman movie, and Warner Brothers is like, well, we
Hold
don't
on a
know
second.
you, so can you prove that you're not just gonna lose us hundreds of millions of dollars? So Memento's budget was 9 million. This one's 46 million, and made over 100. So it was proof of
Jesus.
concept that he could competently make a larger budgeted movie, working with big A-list actors, and not cock it up.
Yeah.
Uh, it would end up being his second collaboration with his cinematographer, Wally Pfister. Oh, excuse me. Who he would go to work with several more times. Um, this movie does have a very similar visual feel to it as Memento. It feels like it's shot in a very similar way. It feels like it was edited in a very similar way. There's a lot of those um, like spinning shots that operate as cuts, which both this does, Memento does, and actually the Dark Knight, or not the Dark Knight, Batman Begins also has quite a bit of that.
I think I know what you're talking about. I actually can't really visualize that, but
It's done like hundreds of times.
the camera is spinning and then it cuts.
Yes, it's used in almost every other scene in Memento. It's done in this easily 20 times, and in Batman Begins, it's done in every scene with Batman and every scene with bats, which is, I would say, a good 60% of the movie.
All right. Yeah.
If you saw it happen once, you'd be like, "Oh right, I've seen that happen 100 times in those movies." He didn't invent this technique; like it's very common. It's just highlighted in those three movies very specifically.
Yeah. So I don't have anything more to say about this.
Yeah,
Um,
this one is. I mean, if Following is like Nolan's forgotten movie, this is like the one people are aware of, but don't watch or don't rewatch. Yeah, kind of just like a slightly above average thriller.
So next is Batman Begins, which is gonna trigger us to talk about the trilogy of Batman. So we're going to stick with Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises, and then backtrack to The Prestige and Inception. Just because that kind of will make more sense to talk as together as like its own sort of thing. So Batman Begins comes out in 2005. Um, yeah, which I this movie. I mean, I don't really want to give a summary of Batman as a character, but if you don't know who Batman is, then um, this is not the podcast to listen to.
Yeah, his parents die. He sees his parents get shot, becomes an orphan, vows vengeance, goes to train in the Himalayas with ninjas, betrays the ninjas, moves back to Gotham, turns into a Batman, and then beats criminals with his fists.
And then tries to get taken
Token.
by Liam Neeson's.
Oh, I see. Yeah, Liam Neeson's. Yeah, that. I just meant the plot of like Batman's origin, not even the plot of this movie.
Well, that is basically the plot of this movie, but yeah, um, it's this. There are some scenes in this movie that are reflected in the Prestige as well, like the prison scenes, especially. Um, so yeah, Batman ends up in jail and basically gets in some fights there. Um, and I'm trying to think of like some of the iconic scenes from this. My favorite quote from this is they like do a flashback of his dad in the well with him because he like fell down in the well or something, and he's like, "Why do we fall, Bruce?" And then it's reflected later through um, Alfred, where Alfred is with Bruce and he goes, "Why do we fall, sir?" And Alfred answers, "So that we can learn to pick ourselves up." And it's done in a, like a pretty emotional scene, an emotional payoff. But the score for the movie is really solid. I believe it was Hans Zimmer, and is it the same guy for The Dark Knight as well?
Yeah, James Newton Howard.
That's right, James Newton Howard. I couldn't think of the three names. Yeah, the score is really solid.
Yeah, I mean James Newton Howard has done 1,000 movies that everyone would have heard of.
Lord of the Rings.
No, that's Howard Shore.
Oh God, that's right, Howard Shore. Okay.
Yeah, this is Mr. Howard.
Okay.
That's Howard.
Different. Yeah. Well, Batman Begins for a while was my favorite superhero movie even after The Dark Knight came out. It was just I stubbornly liked this movie because it was more of like the origin, but I mean, not to get into The Dark Knight yet, but yeah, it's a cool origin movie, and I think a lot of people forget about this movie um, and about how good it really is. Um, Obviously, it brings Christian Bale into the superhero sort of world, but part of the reason I like this movie is just because I admire Batman um, as my favorite superhero, just in general, because he's a guy.
He's a dude and he's good.
Yeah, the vigilante justice piece is.
I am vengeance.
Where is she?
I don't know.
And yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much to say about the first one other than the cinematography for it is pretty cool. When Liam Neeson and Christian Bale are fighting on like ice, there's some cool overhead shots. Pretty much all of the time that's spent in the Himalayas or the place that's supposed to be the Himalayas is pretty sweet. I really like that a lot. I think I think it also
Yeah.
does justice to the comic books reasonably well, which is um, something to admire, that it stays true to that canon, I guess, for the most part. Although people who are super into comic books are probably upset with that statement. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't even pay attention to that. The same way that like a movie based off of a book and somebody goes, it was bad because it was based off of the book and the book, I like the book.
Oh yeah.
It's that, which is just, oh, I'm sorry. People with head injuries should stay in the hospital. That's really all I have to say about the people who are upset about this because it didn't follow Batman Year One. Or Batman The Long Halloween, which are definitely two real comic books this film is based off of.
Gotcha.
But it is definitely different than them, and not an excuse not to like it. There are plenty of reasons not to like it, but
how dare it do its own thing or try to do its own thing?
yeah, that was I'm as edgy as I may have just sounded there. I've definitely had many conversations in my youth which resulted in me being irrationally angry and edgy because I would just repeat the line over and over again. It's not the same thing. It isn't a book. They're not the same. But which obviously nobody. I didn't teach anyone with that anger. Nobody seemed to learn.
Did we ever have those conversations?
No, this was between me and like friends. I don't think I ever
Okay.
had this type of argument with you. Because it's just something that frustrates me to no end. Is yeah, I don't. I like the book so much. I don't want to see the movie. I don't want to have it ruined. All right, well then your imagination is so small that I don't know why you're even remotely invested in fiction or literature. That's one aspect.
There are some movies that, or some books that initially that would be my response. But if I find out more about the movie, then I'm like more interested in it.
Yeah, but think about like your favorite book, which seems borderline unfilmable, which is just to me a masterwork of a movie and a better movie.
Yeah,
It
but
amplifies it. I know you
yeah.
don't necessarily agree, but we're talking about the Clockwork Orange or I'm talking about the Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, I mean, as I get older, it isn't my favorite book, but
Gotcha.
I mean, certainly from like college, it is. It's definitely like in one of my top tens. But um, no, I think it amplifies the book. I wouldn't disagree with that. But also the added information that would make me want to watch it is, oh, it's also by Stanley Kubrick. So that's like
Yeah.
further information that would make me want to watch it. Like if I found out that A Clockwork Orange was done by Steven Spielberg, I'd probably say hard pass. So yeah, that's like my point exactly. Or if it's A Clockwork Orange starring the guy in Belfast, Tenet, Dunkirk, what's his name? Shakespeare guy, Shakespeare boy.
Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah. I'm not saying he's a bad actor, but
That role's not for him.
I don't need Gilderoy Lockhart stepping in as Alex anytime soon.
But yeah, anyway, with whatever this is in terms of a faithful adaptation of literally the most popular fictional character in the history of anything, maybe other than Jesus and Sherlock Holmes.
I was gonna say Sherlock Holmes, but yeah, I think Batman easily trumps Sherlock Holmes at this point.
It's probably close. But yeah, this is an extremely popular character. The movie overall is pretty solid. I agree with you. I like the cinematography. It's a little weirdly edited. The screenplay feels kind of choppy in the way that the scene by scene stuff plays out.
Definitely.
Um, there's that moment where he finally becomes Batman and he's like up on the tower with the gargoyle or like the big, he's up on like a skyscraper and they do that really cool like helicopter shot that goes around the building. And that's maybe the hour mark, hour 15 mark, and it feels like a very cinematic ending. and it's really just the beginning of the movie, and it's weird how long it takes to get to that point before momentum really starts to pick up to it being a Batman movie.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense. I hadn't
that's
really
just like
thought of that.
that's just one example. Oh, I've seen the movie a dozen times, so it's just like on rewatches. I really have just rewatched many movies. It's yeah, it's the pacing. Just somewhere in this, I think it could have been done better. Um, this movie actually makes really good use of miniatures. There's a ton of really good miniatures in this movie.
Oh,
Um,
I was also gonna say color. Like it's deceptively strong, I would say, in its use of maybe not color, but the filtering of color.
mm,
Like on the lens itself. Like it has that sort of like yellowish
yeah,
sort of
sepia.
tint. Yeah, it has the sepia tones.
That's all pretty intentional. Christopher Nolan
Yeah.
is infamously colorblind and makes his movies colorblind, um, which can be good or very bad. In this one, I'd shoot it down the middle, where there are scenes where I wish it was not as gray. Um, his movies can be very visually stunning, but this one I think is that color choice hampers it at times. Um, I'm actually thinking more of the stuff in China than the Himalayas, where it just feels gray and dead.
Oh, I
And
like that.
I guess it's meant to reflect the like grief-stricken state that he's in.
That's what I like
Um,
about it.
and the sepia color of the city itself is meant to show that it's lethargic and what's that, like jaundiced, like the
Yes.
city is diseased. Um, yeah, I actually really like the production design of this movie too, like the art direction, production design, both of like the industrial elements of the city, but also just sort of as a callback to like the Tim Burton,
Yes. Yes.
the two Tim Burton Batman movies. It has a lot of similar elements with the use of like fog machines and smoke. Um, but Christopher Nolan nails the atmosphere better and kind of shies away from it being more like campy and comic booky, which Burton does really well in his Batman movies. This one just allows them, like it takes the material more seriously in a way that um, feels inherently necessary to a character as self-serious as Batman.
We've had this conversation before about anime as well, where I personally like anime that takes itself seriously and doesn't debase itself to just little kids running around like ah, making like weird faces. Like one of my favorite anime is Samurai Champloo because it's. I mean, there are some goofy scenes in that. I'm not
There,
gonna.
there is a whole
I'm
character who just screams and runs scene to scene screaming.
no, but like it's aggression, like it's aggressive levels. Like I appreciate about it, and yeah, I mean, you on some level you kind of understand that might happen in anime, but like even like Attack on Titan takes itself very seriously. Um, sorry, I don't mean to talk about that, but I just find yeah, when the material or when the director is taking the material itself to be serious. Not that everything has to be done in a formal manner, but
Well, it matters because
it
obviously
takes away from the tone and the message.
yeah,
Otherwise,
superheroes and comic book movies are a genre, and in genre filmmaking, you have to be really careful with atmosphere and tone. And
yes.
with a character like Batman, it's very easy to go over the line, which I think we'll get to talk about at the end of this conversation with Zack Snyder's Batman movies, because Christopher Nolan was an executive producer on those, so they're relatively within his wheelhouse. But those are movies that just like patently don't understand what made these movies good. Like they just don't get it at all. They
I don't
just
think
think,
I'll ever watch those. I've never seen them.
yeah, don't. You shouldn't. They're terrible. But they think that like to make Batman serious and mature, it has to be a pitch black movie with pitch black morality, and
Mm,
it just it's completely whiffs on what makes these movies work. Because this movie still has a softer side. Like the underbelly of the movie is the relationship between Michael Caine's Alfred and Bale's Batman, with like, Bale tries to shrug him off and like, I don't, and Alfred's like, little motherfucker, you listen here.
Yeah.
Took care of your family for 50 years. You're gonna stop being a little brat.
And
okay.
That cuts through to the audience really well. I mean, I don't know, maybe it is just being more of a male centric sort of movie, but it cuts through to myself, because that's something that relationship between like two men isn't really shown very often in films, or at least not in like a superhero type movie, except for two guys fist bumping each other after beating the baddies up.
Well, he's like a father figure. He has two. Both him and the villain, Liam Neeson, are like father figures to him. The difference is, one ends up being his enemy and the other his friend and co-detective.
And it's cool too, because Liam Neeson, you like are on board with, and then he doesn't Bruce is met with this dilemma where he's like, oh, I could just join them, but I'm not, because that would be wrong. Right?
Yeah.
Because this man is a terrorist.
Yeah, genociding a whole city in an insane way, like mind poisoning the population so it kills itself. That's pretty unequivocally evil, so it's a good thing he was like, nah, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, I wasn't saying it was a good thing. I just meant from a storytelling perspective, it's cool that he has to sort of choose between Alfred and this guy, despite Alfred not giving him that advice. Like, he has to make that choice for himself. But yes, it's good that he didn't go with that. As a side note, something I forgot is it's also interesting that Cillian Murphy, who plays the Scarecrow in this, auditioned to be Batman. Like, he and Christian Bale sort of like faced off to be Batman. So that would have been pretty interesting. I don't know if the movie would have been nearly as good with Cillian Murphy, but
probably not.
Would have been weird if he had tried to bulk up or bulked up, because it would not have. I don't think he could have been able to do that as well as Christian Bale did. Not that that was necessary for the role, but
it was necessary for the role.
All right, you want to get into the Big Daddy, The Dark Knight?
BioShock. Yeah.
So
that's the part of those BioShock games. They call those evil
I know.
Big Daddies.
I know.
I haven't even played them.
We're gonna skip the Prestige for now. We'll get back to it. Don't worry.
It's a bad movie anyway.
Shut your mouth.
That was what I watched last night, just so you know.
Oh God.
It was the one that was on that I could see.
Oh God.
I own multiple physical copies of it over there, but
this episode might get derailed with a conversation about that movie.
Yeah, let's move on to the sequel.
The Dark Knight. This movie, I certainly view as a meta narrative, going back to like what Memento did, but I definitely view it as a meta narrative, besides it being a superhero movie, which is powerful. Basically, this is the movie where the Joker comes to town, comes to the city, and tries to incite chaos. And Batman is obviously trying to keep justice. And there's a new character introduced in this, Harvey Dent, who, as you have said, is sort of the protagonist of this movie, which is interesting, that he is more of a protagonist than Batman. But it has these three characters sort of continually facing off. Harvey and Batman are working together, and Harvey and Bruce Wayne are also kind of working together, but also at odds.
Like a little bit.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, this is the infamous movie, the last movie, or one of the last movies, depending on if you consider Heath Ledger's role in Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. But yeah, this is the movie that. What?
What the hell are you saying?
This is one of the last movies that Heath Ledger was in.
He was in like 4 more movies. This movie definitely didn't directly result in him dying. No.
That's what I was leading up to, but thanks. Yeah. That's the laugh that killed him. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. His role as the Joker. Where to begin with this one?
You're being too orderly, so I figured I would introduce a little anarchy into the
Despite you putting your finger on the trigger, but your other finger is blocking the hammer from making contact. Yeah. So anyway, I hope someone out there understands that reference. The opening sequence of this movie is just so absolutely awesome. It both withholds the Joker, then it shrouds things in mystery. It's really chaotic, but also extremely elaborate by the end of the sequence, and it's a really elaborately precise plan. And then it just culminates in the Joker violently tying up loose ends, which is like his entire character is that he is both chaos but also a genius with precise plans.
holds his ability to get other people to turn on themselves and each other. He only ends up killing one guy in the whole sequence.
Yeah, but they kill each other. It's all going according to his plan.
He's the anti-Batman.
Yes.
Batman is someone meant to inspire the good in others. The Joker is the opposite, meant to inspire chaos and fear and self-serving.
Yeah, I mean, we could have another discussion on this movie about like anti-heroes and anti-villains, and heroes as well. But I think this movie is like a master class of examining like each of those sort of characters. So yeah, after like the opening sequence, yeah, there is more traveling actually in this movie to East Asia. He goes to China, right? In this one?
Yeah.
It's only briefly, but
Yeah, he's got to get Lao.
right.
What's good with calculation.
What's this exact quote? He says something like, "I know a squealer when I see one."
Yeah, I know a squealer when I see one. Him, he's a squealer. Batman has no jurisdiction. He'll find him and he'll make him squeal.
Yeah, there are some.
And then that's exactly what happens. Batman beats up a couple Asian guys, kidnaps him from China.
There are some
commits international terrorism.
Yeah, through a super elaborate like flying slash like falling with style sequence that Batman uses. But yeah, I mean this movie is chock full of great lines, great imagery, very strong metaphors. The technology used in this is really cool to see it used in this manner. Is this the one where there are a bunch of people dressing up as Batman and he has to like beat them up?
Yeah, that's the second scene of the movie.
Right. That's what I
What's
thought.
the difference between you and me? I'm not wearing hockey pads. What's that, Batman? Oh, I said I am not wearing hockey pads. Oh, I thought that was the real life line that you just used.
This movie also created the meme of just growling things at people. Yeah.
Yeah, Christian Bale takes the Batman voice to a whole new level of unintelligible. Yeah, this I have maybe one or two complaints with this movie, and the rest is just unbridled praise. I think this thing is a masterpiece in many ways. I think you can view it in 5 or 6 different narratives. Like there are a lot of different narratives to view this thing through. I think it's the most thorough superhero movie in terms of diagnosing the actual dichotomy between good and evil and the absurdity of superheroes living in a real world. And
Oh
then the way
yeah.
that criminals would be able to weaponize that against them for their own gain. Um, just excellent all around. Um, I think in terms of like a movie that just shoots for the sky and pretty much hits all its marks, it's hard to argue against this being Nolan's most accomplished movie. It's probably not my favorite, and I don't think it's his best, but in terms of just being able to do everything super well, I think it nails it. Obviously, there's some like, if you think about things just a little bit, stuff starts to fall apart.
Don't do that.
But like the movie has some self-awareness, like in the same way that the first movie, like, you know, when Batman finally confronts Liam Neeson as Batman, he looks at him and he's like, I see you took my messaging about becoming a symbol quite literally. You know, just poking fun at like, why are you dressed like a fucking bat? And then in this movie, there's just like cops who are really goofy. Like there's the hockey pad line. Like the whole sequence, there's this incredible action sequence where they're trying to transport Harvey Dent, who has claimed to be Batman, through like this elaborate series of like uh, underground highways and like open city streets, which culminates in like an 18-wheeler truck literally being flipped over, just factories exploding. But the whole time they're going through this like chase scene, there's like a goofy cop that they keep cutting to, and he's like, "Is that an RPG? Whoa, Jinkies!" Like just these insane line, like just comic book lines, and it feels so disconnected from like the Heath Ledger parts where he's just playing like a madman perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. The score of the movie is also so good. Like if I have to get a bunch of work done or I need some like motivation, I will just listen to that. It's actually like this is one of the best albums I would recommend for writing. Like if you have anything to write, um, I would strongly recommend listening to the Dark Knight score. It's great. um, what was I gonna say? I was gonna say a point off of that. The element of the Joker in this is really interesting and is somewhat similar to a movie that came out around the same time, which is No Country for Old Men and Anton Chigurh. In being just like the physical manifestation of chaos and sort of like death in a way. Like the Joker is not death, but he is sort of like representing that chaos, and he does, you could say, infect Harvey Dent, who then becomes Two-Face, right, with that chaotic sort of mentality. And Harvey decides that, well, he's going to resort to decision making through flipping a coin, which, I mean, you can deconstruct that metaphor in many different ways, but there he like the one scene that sticks out to me about Harvey is he flips the coin, and he's pointing the gun at what is it, Falcone or whatever the guy's name is, and he's like, oh, you lived. And then he flips it again and he's like, who was that for? And he was like, oh, that was now for me. He's like, yeah, I'm good. And then he flips it again and he's like, what the hell, who's that for? And he's like, the driver. And he just shoots the guy in the back of the head and they crash. Like there's just that level of chaos that happens in the movie keeps you guessing, and you're just like, good God, where are we going with this thing? Like you're constantly left guessing because of the characters, but then also the directorial style. The one last thing I wanted to say, my favorite scene of the whole movie is something that is so simple and it's such a simple shot, but it's the scene where the Joker has his head outside of the car, the cop car, and he just like has his like greasy ass hair flying in the wind, and he just opens his mouth and sticks his tongue out, and he's like, and just like looking up at the sky. Like I love that scene so much. It's so cool because it doesn't need to be in the movie. Like you were talking about, sort of like the goofiness. Like it is both goofy, but it's not celebrating chaos, but it's showing you just like the wildness and also like what can be on screen, and you can enjoy it from a level of detachment, because by all accounts, if that was real, like, oh god, I'm not a fan of the Joker, but as like a character in a fictional story, like it's very interesting and really cool to see unravel.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the themes of the movie is comparing himself to a dog chasing cars, and that scene is only in there to be a visual representation that he's like a dog.
Yes.
Um, but that's part of. I mean, that actually goes back to the Prestige, the way that the Joker is actually just the Joker is like Batman. Batman is a fake persona of a genius ninja who uses that as a way to, protect Alfred or whatever. Whereas the Joker is obviously just some kind of like genius ex-military dude with clear knowledge of explosives and committing crimes. And he uses all of his skills to just, get a bunch of gasoline so he can try to blow up a bunch of boats.
Him sitting in the jail cell just like this, and they're like running down the laundry list of just like, so this dude doesn't have fingerprints, all of his clothing is like self-made, and then he's licking his lips and just like going like that, and then yeah, the clapping.
Hi.
Yeah, it's and then the interrogation scene as well, holy shit.
The victim gets all fuzzy. Yeah, he really did smack his head off the table like that. That wasn't acting. He just accidentally slammed his head on the table.
Good. Great. The Gordon running to like unbarricade the door was actually Christopher Nolan running to check on Heath. No, that's not true. I'm making that up. But yeah,
Yeah, somewhere in there you almost described the theme of the movie, which like at the very beginning you did mention that it's about Harvey Dent. It's not really about Batman.
well, I got that idea from you, from our discussions we had before.
Yeah, but I was just gonna expand on that some. Like the whole point of the movie is Bruce Wayne doesn't want to be Batman anymore. He's getting older. He can't keep fighting people in the middle of the night and staying up all hours of the day, and also being a billionaire. Um, so he wants to kind of retire and be with Rachel, his lifelong friend. It doesn't work because Rachel dies in the movie, which ends up being part of the emotional core. Um, but the major thing is that Batman doesn't want there to be superheroes and anti-heroes or supervillains. He just wants there to be someone like Harvey Dent who can exist, who can come in and actually legally change things. He doesn't want there to be vigilante justice. And ultimately that's the Joker's goal, is to say, because you opened the box of vigilante justice, you're going to get vigilante anarchism and anti-justice. And with Harvey Dent being the middle point, being like, no, we really can fix this together. And then, you know, with a couple of, like, the Joker even describes it that way. He's like, in 3 days, with a couple of pounds of dynamite and gasoline, I was able to turn the entire city on its own head and corrupt the most incorruptible people here, except for Batman. And that's what leads to the ending, where Batman has to save Gordon and his family from Two-Face Harvey Dent, killing him, and thus killing the future and hope of the city. Because now they can't legally do what they want to do. Um, and that's where you get the weird ending line of Batman's not the hero we deserve, but he's the hero we need now. But then they flip it, and it's Batman's not the hero we need, but he's the heroes we deserve. It is now a famous line of people quote it as a meme.
Which you just did as well, but yeah.
Yes, because the ending is powerful. That line is not my favorite because it's kind of like, what do I relate this to? There's that line from those Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, which I assume just comes from a comic somewhere of with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Just a perfect line, just a truism and just a great point of wisdom. In the new Spider-Man movies, there's a line that's like, with one who has great gifts, they must be of the most responsible. I view this quote like that.
That's a line in one of the new ones?
Yeah, it's the same as with great power comes great responsibility, but they reword it and add stuff in. So I view the ending of the quote at the end of this movie the same way, where it's like, you could have done that with less words. Like,
Yeah.
it's excessively wordy, and it's
They could have also not included it, like the whole buildup of them talking over him running like through the train cars, like away from the police and everything. Like
yeah.
that worked, but then yeah, they did that.
Why do we have to chase Batman, Daddy? Because he can take it. What? Why would you tell the kid that? He didn't do anything wrong. Shut up, kid.
Why do
We're
we
gonna put
chase
away
him?
12,000 people on a lie.
Why do we chase him? And he's like, because we have to.
Yeah.
Why is he running? Because we have to chase him.
But that ultimately ends up being the through line into The Dark Knight Rises. So the first movie is about how Gotham is an extremely corrupt place and has no hope. Batman arrives, begins to take out the organized crime, saves it from a city-ending stake, which is the comic book element thrown in the top. But in the process, he starts to clean up the corruption within the police office, which is with Jim Gordon. That's amplified. That's the main part of this, which is the Dark Knight is the meat of the whole trilogy. It has everything important with the themes. It has the most interesting two characters, which to me are Harvey Dent and the Joker. Obviously, Harvey Dent dies in this, and Heath Ledger died in real life, so neither of them came back for the third movie. But that ending being that they create the Dent Act, which helps to put away all of those mob criminals. It helps clean up Gotham, and it sets them up for a hopeful future where Batman's not needed. But then we get to The Dark Knight Rises, which obviously, if there's another movie, they needed Batman back.
Tom Hardy enters
Yeah.
the scene.
I don't know if you had more you wanted to say about The Dark Knight.
I'm always gonna have more that I want to say about it, so it's fine. Like we can honestly just move on because I know you also mentioned at one point in time the parallels between that and bringing like into the spotlight post 9/11 world as well.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you forgot about that, but we had a conversation over winter break basically about this, and you brought that up.
Yes.
I don't know if you wanted to mention that. I need to get some water. I'll be right back. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll try to say this in as abridged a way as I possibly can. Basically, noir as a genre for a long time was sort of a response to a collective, like societal issue, usually caused by war or a great tragedy. So noir back in the 20s and 30s, when it sort of was invented or became very popular as a film genre, was in response to the horrors of World War One and then later World War Two. And for a long time, noir didn't really exist. Every so often, some sort of neo noir movie would crop up. But it was usually noir was used as the metaphor for the collective conscious response to a tragedy. And in that same vein, I view The Dark Knight as a very obvious response to 9/11. In that, in the wake of that, an entire country is looking for hope, looking for some meaningful message, looking for heroes. I mean, we just patently said, "Oh, all the cops involved were heroes, all the firefighters involved were heroes," and like I'm not disagreeing with that, but like we were looking for someone to say they saved us. The military, we need the military to go in and bomb them. But in reality, there was no heroes, there was no great hope after 9/11. It was just a horrible tragedy. Um, I don't want to get into the politics of post 9/11 America or the geopolitical ramifications of our reaction to it, but um, basically the way that Batman operates as a hero in a post 9/11 world, I find to be directly correlated. Like he exists in a post 9/11 Batman world.
Yeah.
Where the world is asking for a hero that can't really stop events like that from happening. And so the Joker, being this ultimate terrorist, plays on Americans' real fears.
Yes.
Like we have those fears of bombings. In the movie they bomb a hospital. Obviously, it's a little different in real life than something like what would have been equivalent to bombing like Wayne Tower. But that's the sort of fantasy fulfillment that the movie doesn't shy away from, which movies like the Marvel movies do. The Marvel movies ultimately don't have a good answer to, like, well, what happens when the superhero can't stop the terrorists? This movie does answer it. It's like looking for what the real life solution is to problems of corruption, injustice, and terrorism. And the answer is like, oh, the public. The public has to unite. The public can't vilify people like criminals, which is even a deeper layer of this movie I didn't touch on, which is the fact that just subtextually in this movie, there is a ton of work done about the mistreatment of black people in Chicago, because that's where this movie is shot.
Absolutely.
There's a ton of on-camera violence specifically against black people and not against anyone else.
Yeah.
It's never mentioned, like it's never openly stated, but it is certainly a part of it, and it culminates in the big boat explosion scene where all the criminals are shady looking black guys and they end up being the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the end, that's what the movie is saying. Like, no, all these rich, quote unquote, innocent, Harvey's innocent citizen, those people need to not look at other Americans, which we've imprisoned in insane numbers, as enemies. We're creating our own terrorists, which is, again, a commentary on the very people who did 9/11. They were enemies of the state who used to be foreign allies of America. So it ends up being, to me, this very deep, intentional metaphor commenting on multiple facets of American life. And I mean, to be able to do that in a movie about a man, a bat man, literally just I'm a flying bird mammal guy, Batman. Like that's yeah. So that's why I think The Dark Knight is a absolute masterpiece. So then, yeah, with that rant out of the way, now we can move forward into.
I think it was.
Dark
I think it was. It was worthwhile, honestly, because I didn't really consider all of that either before we talked about it. But yeah, Dark Knight Rises. Sorry.
Yeah, it's probably I've just seen the movie too many times and thought about it a lot, and somebody's probably written this before, or maybe I'm just wrong, but um, yeah, Dark Knight Rises, also known as the Tale of Two Cities.
Yeah. So they took out the two characters. They took out and replaced them with Bane and Catwoman.
Ben Roethlisberger's in this movie.
So is Hines Ward.
Hines Ward lives canonically.
But Ben doesn't?
He's exploded instantly.
Oh, good. Got it. Understood. Yeah. There's a scene basically at Heinz Field, which doesn't exist anymore. It has been renamed. And the city basically explodes.
That's because they blew it up.
The field explodes, yeah.
Yeah, they blew up the real Heinz Field in this movie for real. That's why it's not Heinz Field anymore. They had to rebuild it because of this film. That's how dedicated Christopher. We haven't talked about how much he loves practical effects yet, but that's how dedicated he is to his craft. He blew up an entire football stadium just for one scene in a movie.
The hospital in The Dark Knight where Heath Ledger presses the button, it doesn't work, and then he just keeps clicking the button until it explodes and he runs away. And he's also wearing a nurse outfit in full makeup. Such a good visual. Yeah, this movie is fun. I was not as critical after watching this as you were. I remember sitting down in the car afterwards and being like, "Well, I enjoyed that," and Nolan had a harsh take on it. I believe the word "trash" may have been used or something.
Yeah.
I think this movie serves as like a pretty good capstone to the trilogy. I mean, it's been said many times before, but I think this is the best superhero trilogy. I don't
without
think
question.
I don't think many people would disagree with that. I can't really.
Actually, I think if you removed Age of Ultron from the Marvel's Avengers
Oh, I thought you were gonna
series,
go down the Ant-Man argument.
well, we haven't. Ant-Man 3 comes out next week, so then we'll know for sure. I'm sure Quantumania is going to take the Ant-Man trilogy above
Check
this.
in with us later.
Yeah, in a
We'll
week,
see.
I will be paid billions of dollars by Disney to promote their products, and be a very big fan of Ant-Man Quantumania.
Back to Dark Knight Rises and Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy steals the show with his big bad role as Bane, who he looks like he's 6'5" in the role, but he's really only like 5'10".
And he's just all shoulders.
Yes, he is completely shoulders in this. An iconic mask, which then alters his voice. Do you feel in charge? You're gonna need to stop doing that.
I'm laughing because I went and saw Infinity Pool this week with a friend, and like literally before it started, both of us were just saying Infinity Pool in Bane's voice for no reason. Just going like, the Infinity Pool is complete.
I used to play NHL a bunch with some friends, and there were quite a few bits that involved the Bane, the Bane voice as well. Yeah, it's a solid one.
It's a very silly voice.
Yeah, but I think it works with Bane's character in this.
Yeah.
Back to the opening sequence of this is also really cool as well. The whole like plane swapping situation that happens. Yeah, your eyes okay?
Yeah, I got a weird report on my computer.
Is it full?
We're good.
Okay.
It was some disturbing stock market information.
Well, we acted like we would be able to make it through this list in not that much time, but it's
I never pretended that was going to happen.
Oh, it's just 12 movies. 12
All right.
movies.
I fully intended to distract myself along the way. It's also hard to talk about a Batman trilogy without somewhere getting in there and talking about other superhero movies, but
Yeah. The Dark Knight Rises. Let's start with this. What made you change your mind that it wasn't as bad as you initially thought it was? Because you recently rewatched it and you said that you had a bit of a change of heart about it.
probably a number of things. Possibly being more mature and just having a better understanding of the character or what they were trying to do with this third movie. Watching it in a pseudo hallucinatory fever state because I was sick with COVID. watching it in very close proximity to the other two movies, which I don't think I'd ever really watched it like as a trilogy very intentionally.
Wow.
Um, there's also the fact that like a big part of why I disliked this movie for so long was obviously loving The Dark Knight when it came out and being hyped, just so high on the hype for this movie that it coming out and being so much less on the surface than The Dark Knight and not having a lot of obvious, like, deep, rich layers that it did kind of just made me go, just, spitting on the floor, feeling that this just didn't live up to its predecessor. And I think obviously that's very intentional. It's not trying to live up to the Dark Knight, it's trying to be a very different type of movie. Inception being in between them also probably colored my take on it, but we'll get to that when we talk about Inception. Um, but yeah, it's hard. There are issues I think I still have with this. There's some elements of atmosphere and tone in this movie that are not in the first two that I like about the first two. And part of it is the fact that this movie takes a really long time to actually get into it, to deliver the high points emotion wise to the character of Batman that make the Dark Knight so good and make the hard hitting beats of the like sort of end third ish of Batman Begins work so well. Um, it's a Batman movie, so as someone who's like, yeah, I want to see Batman kick out, it kind of hurts that Batman doesn't show up for 2 hours. Or he's in, the hour mark is Batman getting his ass kicked by Bane. Which, nobody wants to see that. Everybody wants to see Batman be a big, strong lad.
Literally his back broken. That that scene is pretty brutal.
Just easily beats the shit out of him.
Like he's not tortured in the scene, but like just showing that alone was really jarring. And like it's supposed to be like archetypically like you see your hero on screen just getting rocked. Like he's split in two and you're just like, "Oh shit. I thought he was just gonna like fight him off and Bane would have to run or something, but nah." This is a different one we're dealing with.
Yeah, so in terms of the plot, I mean, getting into the plots of these, they're so convoluted that I don't feel too bad about not like describing them beat by beat or anything like that.
The plot isn't too important to the movie. I mean, obviously it's important to the movie, but yeah,
the character work is what's more interesting.
Right. Right.
It brings a satisfying conclusion to the character of Batman. Catwoman is an interesting enough character, someone who like comparing her to Batman, she's someone who is a criminal, but typically by necessity. Because she's poor and grows up an orphan or homeless or poor or something, and so she uses crime as a means to escape that, which is kind of her whole character arc of like, I just need one last score to escape this life to live a better one.
That's the whole ethos behind Selena Kyle, yeah, in everything she's in.
Yeah, and it works in this one. Paired alongside Batman, at least. Bane, not too interesting, just a big dumb guy. And then the twist being that it's Ra's al Ghul's daughter is also just like, it's whatever, sure, just you got me. I didn't know it was her. She was a bad lady. All you got me.
Yeah.
And that stuff to me is all the comic book stuff, and that is the weakest part of the movie. But there's other interesting elements to it, like the MacGuffin is just like a big energy bomb, like nuclear bomb thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was meant to be a renewable, sustainable energy source, which ends up being harnessed by Bane and his associates to hold the city hostage, which is like an interesting take on our ability to try to plan for the future and stop global warming from happening by creating renewable energy sources. And even more interesting, the reluctance that Bruce Wayne has to allow this thing to be made because he's worried it'll be used in the wrong way, which it immediately is. Like, as soon as it's finished, it's immediately used in the wrong way.
Yeah, which gets back to the age-old debate of having something that could be used for good, and then there are always going to be people out there who want to see the world burn or profit off of threatening to burn whatever. Getting back to the Joker idea as well. Yeah, I don't have too much more to say about this one. It's a good capstone to the trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly an excellent movie. Definitely not the hacked in garbage I once thought it was. I think the superhero comic booky stuff sticks out a little bit more. But when it works, it does work. Like, Batman getting out of the prison is definitely like the core part of the movie. Him rising.
Yeah, I like that part, but I know some people don't. Like, I've had conversations with people and it just like doesn't work for them, but I don't. Yeah, it's a bit of a stretch, sure, but
Hey, it took me 10 years to get it, so
it's a superhero movie.
yeah.
Cool. So are we going back to the Prestige now?
Yes.
Oh boy. So, we did record one of our first episodes on the Prestige, but that was somewhat all over the place because it was one of our first ones we recorded. The audio also wasn't very solid with it, so we kind of scrapped
this
that
episode,
one.
which has been rigidly structured due only to me and my ability to stay on topic well and not get distracted by things like pop-ups on my computer or Marvel movies.
And pristine audio.
Right.
The Prestige is about two dueling ambitious magicians that basically continually try to outdo one another until basically their consequences become really dire and they respond to these dire consequences through their ambition in different ways. Is sort of how I would explain that. There is a pretty hefty twist in this. It's starring Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, Scarlett Johansson, Michael Caine as well. Some usual suspects here, and I forget the other woman's name.
David Bowie.
No.
Rebecca Hall Ferguson. Rebecca
Yes.
Ferguson Hall.
Yes.
And Maria Hall.
Oh, too many. Okay.
It's Maria Hall, but those other ones are real people and actors.
And Andy Serkis as well.
What about Piper Perabo?
Cool. Let's talk about the movie I like so much. Yeah. So this movie is both a love letter to storytelling, but also filmmaking specifically, and sort of the magic that can be evoked in the precise manner of creating a movie, but also in fulfilling one's ambition and also like going into the pursuit of your ambition and also what it will drive you to do. And yeah, I just find this movie to be perfect. I don't really have many critiques on it. And even if you know the twist of the movie, it doesn't diminish the value, I would say, by that much upon rewatch. This might be my most rewatched movie. personally. But there's a lot to talk about in here. I really like the structure that it has. I forget what the very first asserted idea is in it.
Are you watching closely?
No, not the first quote. Sorry. Yeah, the first quote of the movie is "Are you watching closely?" which I find to be awesome, and it's also like whispered as well, so you have to turn the sound up really high to it. No, I'm talking about the trick, the way a trick is. There's like
It
the
starts
blank.
with an image of the hats and the cats. Are you watching closely?
Yes, I'm talking about the terms. There are words that are used. So then there's the turn and then there's the prestige. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
The pledge?
Yeah, the pledge. That's what it is. So it's talking about also sort of the payoff of a movie and the payoff of like a very strong film, and is showing you through a mirrored reflection of what it's like to be a magician. There's a quote from it as well. It was the look on their faces, which is what I imagine any artist who enjoys what they're making and like the effect that it might have on their audience is reflected through a magician who is standing under the stage, like basking in the audience's appreciation of the trick.
Well, that's one type of artist. The whole point of this is to show you the two types of obsessive artists who exist. The one is the showman, the other is the engineer.
Yes.
The one who crafts the perfect art but doesn't know how to dress it up and doesn't necessarily care about the recognition beyond, making sure that people know that he did it well.
Yeah, and there are a few different artists in the movie as well. It explores that to varying degrees. There's the very old man who does the trick, and he has the like really huge glass bowl that he pretends he's old or is not pretending he's old, and then he like walks out and looks all like crotchety, and they're like, how does he do that? And then the one guy's like, don't you get it? This is the trick. He's just living out the trick. And the guy like taps the bricks, and he was like, this is all we have. Like, this is our world. Like, if you can convince someone, if you can trick someone for even like a moment, like that's special. And I fully believe that. Like, that's one of the things I love about stories is you can convince someone that something is real, whether it's a feeling, whether it's harkening back to their past, whether it's a new idea, whether it's inspiring them or motivating them or what have you. You've made something real to them that wasn't quite tangible before.
Yeah, but have you considered the cost?
Yes. Oh, you're supposed to ask it again.
No, he doesn't say yes.
Oh, he just says yes, but have you considered the cost?
No, he doesn't he dismiss him. He's like, money is not an issue. He's like, no,
oh yeah,
have you considered the cost?
Yeah, money is no problem. And then he asks him again. I love that question. Yeah. I almost don't want to ruin it, just with walking through the plot here, but did you have any commentary on this?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I guess I have a number of things. I don't know where to start. Like, this is this is a type of movie that doesn't get made anymore. Not in terms of quality. It's like directly in that middle budget category of films that Hollywood just has decided to scrap. Especially something like a middle budget period piece type movie. Because like on the surface, that's all this thing is. It's just like a movie about some magicians.
Yeah.
It's the deeper layers, yeah, the meta narrative of being about entertainment and being about filmmaking and the obsession to, craft the right type of movie or trick. Because obviously, that's what magic is being compared to is filmmaking. And so there's a lot of like nods directly to the audience. Like, you get that one? That one's like, this guy's the director. You get that part? That's the producer. You get it? You get it now? And I mean, I love all that stuff. It all plays really well. The art direction in this movie's great. Like, it always feels like it is the period it claims that it's in. The immersion works perfectly. Um, the magic part of the movie, ironically, is the science, which is Tesla's science. Um, it's just our lack of understanding of it that provides some of the issues within, like, some of the conflicts of the movie. Um, now I'm trying not to spoil it.
It's fine. You can still explain it without. Basically, the twist. No, I'm not going to spoil it. I was just going to say. All right, never mind. We're done talking about the twist. Just go watch this movie and tell us what you think about it.
The twist, Andy Serkis is in the movie, and about 3/4 of the way through, he rips off his mask and he reveals himself to be actual Gollum who time traveled because of a machine Nikola Tesla built. And there's this like crazy fight near a volcano where they're fighting over like this key piece of the machine, which is like this little circular golden ring.
And then he fights Caesar from Planet of the Apes, and they get into a
No,
yelling
not
match.
the apes. We can't. That was what I didn't want to spoil. Was the apes.
Sorry.
At the end of the movie, you learn it was Earth all along. The Statue of Liberty is in the background.
Yeah. So, please go watch The Prestige.
Yeah, great movie.
I wrote a pseudo essay on this, I think, when I was in Taiwan, that I still have bits and pieces of. But yeah, I could go on and on about the power of this movie. We'll probably discuss it individually again at some point, but yeah. You good to move on after breaking your desk?
Yeah, should be. That
All
wasn't
right.
my desk, and also not through my microphone.
Inception came out in 2010. And this is a movie that is primarily about dreaming and questioning whether or not what is being shown is a dream or if it is reality. So it's it's starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Cillian Murphy, Marion Cotillard. I can never say her name correctly. Yeah, Tom Hardy is in it as well. It is Elliot Page is in it. What's his name? The guy I'm thinking of, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Yeah, they're all in this.
What
But
about Dilip Rao? You didn't mention him.
no, I forgot. Sorry,
Did you mention Ken Watanabe?
forgot. I was
That's
building up to that.
extremely racist that
I
you would
was
not mention the only two characters of color.
I was building up to those characters.
Terrible. Just
All right, you can talk about Inception. Good luck. Go
oh,
ahead.
that my mic was muted on all that, so
All right. Great. Now everyone is just gonna think I was talking to myself.
I didn't realize it, but
Ken Watanabe is in it, and I can't remember the guy's name. I don't have it in front of me. I can't say his name.
you monster.
What's his name?
Dilip
The
Rao.
Dilip Rao.
Yeah.
And the other guy who died recently, who's in The town.
Tom Berenger?
No. Mm-mm.
Michael Caine is dead?
Mm-mm. No, he's the guy that's in the dream, the guy's father. Pete
Oh,
Postlewaite.
yeah.
Wait, what the hell? Is he the father of Postlewaite? Remus Lupin?
What?
Is he?
David Thewlis?
Oh, Lewis. Just the TH thing hurt my head. The THLs. So sorry about that. Oh, David Thewlis, that guy.
Oh yeah, Pete Postlewaite died like shortly after this movie came out.
Yeah. So not recently to this episode, but soon after.
R.I.P.
Yeah, there's some like wild. I wouldn't even call them sets, just locations that this movie is shot in, like almost in like a Bond like manner, but they involve dreams, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are a number of ways because of the nature of this being about dreams and the lack of clarity between what is reality and what is dreaming, and the fact that the whole movie could be a dream leads to some interesting theories about both the ending but also the whole point of it. Um, so the main character's name is Cobb, which is also the name of the mentor guy in Following.
Oh God.
I've never seen the theory anywhere, but I assume it is a theory that this is just a dream that character had after betraying the protagonist of Following. I know that originally this was meant to be more of a horror film that Nolan wrote after doing Insomnia and wanting to make more stuff in the horror genre.
That has yet to happen.
No, you mean him working in
Horror.
Yeah, I think he's too big now to ever do that.
That's too bad.
Um, yeah, I think his success literally made it impossible for him to work in a genre like horror, at least directly. Maybe not. I mean, he's only like, what is he, 50, 60, 52. So he's a young middle-aged man. There's time. But yeah, this I agree with you. It is kind of like a Bond movie. It has a lot of elements of a Bond movie.
Well, the locations themselves, but yeah, and otherwise.
Yeah. Um, it still has a lot of those signature practical effects, like the spinning hallway was a real thing. A lot of the big set pieces are done with miniatures, so there's still a lot of the excellent practical effects use. But it also starts to fold in really good CGI, which Nolan had not used a lot of before. And so to see a guy at the top of his craft playing around with CGI and practical effects together to such success is deeply gratifying and maybe a little disappointing for how much of a crutch it's been for other filmmakers since then.
There's one scene in particular that hurts to watch that is CG related, and that's where they just step up onto the wall. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about, but
it's a
it
little
just
glitchy, yeah.
It is like too liquidy of the not the pixels, but the motion of it. Like it just looks like a poor video game.
There's a stutter.
Yeah.
Like it's not a fluid motion. There's also one near the end when they're in limbo and
oh yeah,
Paige kicks the dude off of the thing and then jumps and like all of the buildings are collapsing. That CGI is a little suspicious.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, it is cool seeing a director of this caliber, but also money wise playing around with it.
Yeah, I will say it looked perfect in the theaters. So part of it is IMAX projection because this was shot largely in IMAX. I don't know if they went through and shot it again with like 35 millimeter cameras. Um, but they were using like tons of 360-degree cameras and things. Um, I believe this is actually, I think Wally Pfister still shot The Dark Knight Rises. Yeah, he did. Um, but this is one of the last projects where the two of them collaborated together. Um, which this may be the most like consistently visually impressive Christopher Nolan movie, other than maybe Interstellar. Um, but yeah, this one is just like a technical feast. The sound is incredible. The music's awesome. Cinematography is always great. Um, the acting is hit or miss. Just like the level of the actors is odd, and they
Yeah,
don't all have chemistry together. Which the movie almost kind of comments on because the whole point of like it's a heist movie. It's basically just a big dream heist, but instead of stealing, they're planting an idea. And they kind of comment on that when they like do the like you son of a bitch I'm in like when they're forming the team. They kind of comment on the fact that like the team doesn't work together well, which makes sense in their general lack of chemistry together. Um,
that idea is somewhat, well, not that specific idea, but this is somewhat shown in Tenet as well from a writing standpoint. When it's just like people in suits in an exotic location walking around talking about something, but it's done to a lesser degree in Inception than in Tenet.
yeah, Tenet and Inception are a, their own category of movies. Like there aren't any movies like either of them.
Hmm.
They exist in a pretty unique area of their own, and I think they're both of a similar quality. Um, I think Inception is maybe a little better. It's a little more well-rounded, but
Certainly.
they suffer from some similar problems. Um, Ten, they're just more jarring for a
We
number
can get
of
into
reasons,
that
but
one after, but yeah.
yeah. Um, the meta narrative of this one? Like clearly, the team coming together is a narrative for the filmmaking experience. You know how they form a team. Like, oh, this guy's the producer, this guy's the director. That's the act. You know, it runs through, and so this version of the meta narrative, what stops it from being stale is generally like the concept of the movie being, you know, planting dreams in people's heads, the same way that a movie plants an idea deep in people's heads. Uh, by and large, I think it works. I think this is an excellent movie. Um, each rewatch, the problems are highlighted more. I do think, like the lack of chemistry between the actors, just in general, how well they do with the material, and the fact that there's so much exposition. There's like 30 minutes in a row of just people explaining stuff.
That was what I was kind of getting at, was there's a lot of exposition in this, which is then reflected in Tenet.
Yeah. The
I
difference
go.
is Tenet explains it away with a hand wave, like, just feel the movie. Don't think about it. It doesn't need to make sense. This movie's like, you gotta understand the technical aspects of the machine and how dreaming works and how shit. It's like, okay, Chris, we get that it's a smart idea.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't call it masturbatory, but it's kind of like overly explaining the thing to tell you to not try to poke holes in the logic of it. Which I also wanted to go back to the meta narrative because I think the idea from Memento is also somewhat relevant in this one, where Mal, his wife, um, Cobb basically has a memory of her, or several memories of her, but she ends up killing herself because she can't tell if it's a dream or not, basically. And so there is sort of this other meta narrative of him feeling drawn to living inside of his own memories. So like the self-deception piece does run pretty strong in this movie as well, which is another sort of striation that you could explore that theory to see whether or not he's actually dreaming or not, or if it's all just happening in his own head, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's another interesting movie where, like, Leonardo DiCaprio as Cobb is the protagonist, but he's not really the one the story's about. In fact, he's the antagonist. He's in between, like, what the character the story revolves around. He's the one in between him and his goal. Like, I think Cobb is kind of the villain. Like, everything he's doing is selfish, and it puts everyone else in the movie in danger just so he can, you know, go back home because he's being accused of a murder that he didn't commit. Even though it is kind of his fault his wife is dead, because Inception is the thing he did to his wife, convincing her that her reality wasn't real, causing her to kill herself.
Mm-hmm.
Which in turn, the memory of her dying makes him question reality because of her questioning reality. So it's like a twisted form of Memento where he's created his own tragedy.
Yeah, and the one scene where he goes down into the basement of his memory and like Mal is there and Elliot Page goes
Yeah,
down
Paige
with
goes
him.
down. No,
And
Paige invades his dream
yeah,
and locks him out of going down and goes down into the.
yeah, but there's that like there's the sound like the very aggressive sound and Mal turns around and
Yeah,
then
she
just
steps
like
on the glass, which like
triggers triggers Mal turning around, and it is a scene from a horror movie because then she just basically like chases her, and it's terrifying even though it's just a woman. uh it's very unsettling. um yeah, fantastic movie. The fact that they literally have the score and they slowed it down to be like, 1/100th of what the sound would be, and then stretched it out so that when they're inside of the dream, that's what it would actually sound like. Is Yeah, that's Christopher Nolan in a nutshell.
the way I describe or think about this movie and Tenet together is that this movie is kind of like, or at least I assume this is the way that Nolan thinks about it, is that this is like a dumb movie made for smart people, whereas Tenet is a smart movie made for dumb people. That's the way I think about them.
Dear God.
Because like deep down, all the contrivance and stuff in this movie is just like they have a machine that lets them go into dreams, and there's like two rules, which is just like if you die in the dream, you just wake up, unless you're heavily sedated, in which case your brain turns to scrambled eggs. Unless you go deep enough and kill yourself, and then it's just all the same. Which is kind of like, that's.
Yeah,
I thought about that for more than 30 seconds and it's starting to fall apart.
there's
So is the dream.
there's part of
Oh
that.
shit.
Yeah,
Oh shit.
there's part of that thread that if you pull it fast enough, Christopher Nolan's on the other end and he's just like, no, just keep going deeper into the dream. I'm not gonna let you think too hard about it.
Yeah.
Despite me
Whereas,
also having a half hour of exposition.
yeah. The exposition is kind of needed and it moves very smoothly. Like, this is a very well edited movie, but
Yeah.
yeah. It is starting to show some cracks in his ability to craft, excellent blockbuster movies. Um, I view this as about the same quality as The Dark Knight Rises, and I think both of them are just a little better than Batman Begins, just as like a general feeling I have towards them.
Okay.
So yeah, let's do Tenet next.
That makes
Then we
more
can
sense.
circle back to the other two, just because Tenet is like in the same vein as Inception.
Yeah, I think Interstellar and Dunkirk go more together anyway. But yeah. Tenet came out in 2020. A nice pandemic movie.
Yes, delayed numerous times because of COVID. It was released and considered a box office failure, even though it didn't make money. I think they might have accidentally spent too much on the marketing. It didn't help that Christopher Nolan spent like the 6 months before it came out just repeatedly telling people that they were bad for not watching movies in the cinema.
That also, I did go watch it in theaters.
Oh, same. Yeah, to be clear, I watched all of his releases from The Dark Knight onward in theaters, and they're so much better in the theater than they are on your TV. Primarily because of the sound. The sound in these movies is critical, and to watch them on Dolby surround sound it changes the feeling of them dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
I've since watched all of them, just with headphones on, so I'm able to get the full scope of the sound, but not the feeling of the sound. Which is
Yeah.
Yeah. This of all of them, like if you look at Nolan's career as being two periods of time, you have the 2000s movies, which you can lump Following into, and then the 2010s movies, which I would lump Tenet into. You basically have someone who's able to work really well within the independent space, making very original movies, and then work in the big budget blockbuster space, successfully adapting a long-term brand and character into something where his vision shines through completely. And that's highly unique. And just in that 10-year period, following Memento, Insomnia, both Batman movies, and Prestige, like he set himself apart from almost every other filmmaker working in Hollywood in that time. Since then, in his 2010s work, everything has been a big blockbuster. And that's a different level to operate on, especially when you have stuff like Inception and Tenet, which are two really wacky sci-fi concepts with huge budgets, with tons of exposition, shot all over the world, different countries, with big casts doing wild stuff. This one ends up being, I think, conceptually more interesting than Inception, but everything doesn't quite come together. But the more you think about it, the more interesting it gets, which is the inverse of Inception.
Yeah, I really felt that when I was watching it for the first time. There was, I forget what moment it was. It was like right before, I don't know how much of this we're gonna ruin, but it was right before the
People didn't get this movie anyway, so we can just ruin the whole thing.
It was right before
They didn't.
the
People really
fight.
didn't understand this movie at all.
How? You said this is a smart movie for dumb people?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or a dumb movie for smart people. I think it either works for either one, depending on how you look at it. I think this is a really smart movie. I think it tries to dumb itself down for the mass audience. I just think it fails to do that. That's why it's not a masterpiece.
Anyway, what I was gonna say is that like towards the start of the triggering of the fight scene at the end, like right before that thing with the two teams, right?
The pincer movement, yeah.
Yeah, I just got this general feeling where I was like, I like this movie. I'm enjoying the movie, and I'm like just feeling the movie, and I'm not trying to like think about it too much, and I'm just kind of like getting washed by like the waves of what's happening, and I really enjoyed that. Like I liked it. Like there was no part of me that was like getting hung up on the technicalities or whatever. Not that I usually would, but there's sometimes I watch a movie and I'm like, all right, I'm done with this. Like I'm through with that. I'm still gonna watch, but like I have a huge issue. It didn't really happen in this one. I just thought it was really cool. Like I enjoyed the whole like moving backwards piece, the whole idea behind that and taking that onto like a big budget stage was just like, holy shit, what an undertaking that must have been. But yeah, like I was able to sort of not dispel my disbelief, but sort of dispel my own logic from stepping in and ruining the movie is how I would describe it. and just kind of feeling it as a piece of art that was unfolding. And I just really enjoyed it because of that. I don't think everyone felt that way, but
No, the biggest complaint is that you don't understand what's happening because the sound mixing is bad. I couldn't understand what the people were saying, so it's a bad movie. This is a common critique of across all of Nolan's films, by and large.
I don't have anything nice to say about that. Like I that just makes me angry.
Yeah, so that's the
Watch it with
biggest...
subtitles and use your eyes to read then.
What if you saw it in the theaters? They don't have subtitles there.
Don't go to the theater anymore.
Don't go over there. Yeah, that's one complaint. The other is that it's too complicated, which some people had a problem understanding what happened.
Go watch Winnie the Pooh.
That is way more complicated than this. Those rabbits talk.
What rabbits?
There's a rabbit in Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking about the horror movie Winnie the Pooh.
Cocaine Bear?
Mm-mm. Maybe you're unfamiliar with this work.
There's a movie called Cocaine Bear coming out in a couple weeks where a bear eats a duffel bag of cocaine and goes on a killing spree.
You can look it up after the episode. There's
The Winnie the Pooh horror film?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to keep pretending it didn't exist, but...
I haven't watched it, to be clear. I just saw a post about it.
It's out? I thought it was coming out later this year.
Someone watched it.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, yeah.
Another problem I think people have with this movie is because of its highly conceptual nature, they don't get that most of it hinges on paradoxes. And so the entire movie ends up being a paradox where there are multiple versions of characters alive at the same time, sometimes in the same place.
What I still am lost as to what the issue with that is and how you don't understand that. Like, what's the problem with that?
What do you mean?
Why are people having an issue with that?
Oh, we have to go back to this. All right. Donald Trump was president for 4 years, a man who was obviously a con man who tricked people into believing he would be the man to drain the swamp after spending 50 years in the public life as the creator of the swamp. And now they're surprised that he took their money.
He's still the president, though.
Yeah.
The shadow president.
Not my president, but for those only listening, I'm wearing a bright red Marine Corps hat, which if you looked at me from behind, you would just think was a MAGA hat.
Oh God, I wasn't even thinking that, but yeah. No, I don't
Remember,
know.
Pastafarianism. That's why people didn't get it.
That is my religion. Anyway, that I'm still not sure how people don't understand or can't accept that, but it's just an interesting idea to put on screen.
The same way that people don't understand why Donald Trump was elected or why he'll get elected again.
So you can't live in reality or consider other alternatives. Understood.
Ding 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 ding.
Hector.
Yeah, I need a little Hector bell.
Hector.
Ding ding
I
ding
have
ding
I
ding.
have one actually.
Oh,
It's part of a
God.
game called The Pit. It's actually a pretty fun card game.
I do agree with you. This movie's not like that complicated. Like, this isn't the smartest movie I've ever seen. But in terms of being able to make,
I'm not trying to say that to be like, whoa, look at my big brain. I was able to sort out this stupid movie. I just don't like, there are other movies like Primer that just like my brain hurts.
Yeah, and I think this movie's way more complicated than Primer.
Yeah, but I think I can understand it more than I can Primer.
And most people couldn't even get through Primer. It was too complicated. They only watched this one because they liked the vampire from Twilight, or the fellow from Black Klansman, or because it was made by the man who made the Batmans.
Or Gilderoy Lockhart being in it.
Nobody watched it because Kenneth Branagh was in it.
I
Except
didn't
for
even
like
know it was him until I saw the cast. Was like, wait, what?
maybe
The tiger
like
is Kenneth Branagh?
yeah, maybe like his wife. That would be my guess. Like whoever
I
Kenneth Branagh's wife is was the only person who watched this for him.
She's in Gatsby actually. I forget the actress's name. She's
His wife.
Jordan in The Great Gatsby, yeah. Jordan Baker. She's like really tall and lanky, slender.
Lindsay Branagh.
Yeah. Unless I'm
Oh
completely wrong.
no! I mean his real life wife.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No. The bit was that the only person who went to the theater to watch Tenet, because Kenneth Branagh was in it, was his real life wife.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Yeah, no, not Elizabeth Debicki.
Got it.
Um,
I do wish they did something a little like more Guy Ritchie gangsterish with the tiger idea. Don't
yeah.
give me those suspiciously squinted eyes at me. Suspicious, highly suspicious.
Yeah, I mean the villain in this movie is like totally underwritten and isn't really a character. It's just
It could
mean
be anyone.
mean man with cancer, angry because past self ruined future. So blow it up.
No, I meant like her taking him down, like being a tiger.
Rawr.
Like I thought that was a cool idea, but it could have been like there could have been either more of a build up or a payoff to it. But
That's yeah. Nolan doesn't play word games like that. I also didn't even know his name was the Tiger.
his name is the tiger.
You've somewhere along the line, you've completely lost me. Like I don't know what tiger you're talking about.
They do like a whole like back and forth about like a tiger, and then he like leaps at her like a tiger, and she shoots him.
I couldn't hear any dialogue in this movie.
I, I'm gonna beat you over the head with these headphones. uh, yeah. I mean, I really enjoy this movie, to be honest with you. Uh, I think it has a cool, interesting opening sequence, which Christopher Nolan is known for at this point. And if you do pay attention clearly, you know, it's pretty obvious who the foreshadowed figure is in it at the beginning. Like,
Neil,
yes.
also just himself, maybe.
Oh, I thought it was himself. Sorry, not Neil. Yeah.
They're both there, so it's unclear which one it is.
The first time I watched, well, it looks more like him. It looks more like the protagonist, as he is called in the movie, which is a really funny bit.
It makes sense once you get the movie, though.
That he's called the protagonist because everything stems from him in a way.
Because he's the center of that reality.
Yeah.
Like the whole point of the movie is that he is the one who stops the current present they're in from becoming the future by destroying that present, by destroying the future that ruined it.
Sure.
It's a grandfather paradox.
Right. They like close that door, basically.
Yes, the protagonist stops the future from being ruined by saving the present, by stopping the future.
Yeah, they close the door, which leads up the staircase, which loops back down to the same door, so they closed it.
Yes.
Whoever is driving as a listener
Vaguely.
has just crashed their car.
That's Yes, that is pretty close to being right.
Return your seat to the upright position.
Yeah, I mean, my only real complaints, other than Kenneth Branagh's weird Russian accent, would be the insane amount of
Exposition.
and the fact that visually they try to break up the exposition by cutting between different settings. But the problem is it's the same conversation. So we're basically supposed to believe that they're having the same conversation either over and over again, or they're just like, okay, stop. And then they go to another country and then they continue the conversation. So that part of it is like, just like, what are we doing? Like, it almost feels like satire. It's like, this looks like you're mocking the existence of a Bond movie.
Yeah,
Which I'm a fan of, but then it doesn't do that the whole way through. So
I
it's like,
kind of thought it was doing that, and then it didn't, and I was like, "Wait, what? I'm getting mixed messages here." Michael Caine being in it for a whole a minute and a half is pretty funny. Solid cameo.
yeah, that's a fine part of it. That is the worst part of the movie, is that beginning part where it's just he meets the one guy who tells him to meet Old Man, and Old Man tells him to meet Indian Man, but it's not Indian Man he goes to meet, it's Indian Woman, and Indian Woman tells him to go meet Russian Man, and Russian Man's not there. It's Russian Man's wife. Russian Man's wife says, meet me at the hospital, the museum, but the museum's at the airport, so then instead of going to the airport, he has to beat up the thugs, and then he goes to the airport with the man from the very first part of the First Man part, but then when he goes to the airport, he's there going backwards in time, but also the other. So yeah, basically until from he meets the vampire guy until he gets to the airport is like a lot of nonsense. I kind of like the part where they shoot up the building to the like Indian couple's roof.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like, all right, this is a lot. This is a bit much.
Wait, so why do you like this as much as you like Inception then?
Oh, because I think the actual incorporation of like a temporal pincer movement and the grandfather paradox and the chicken making the egg, which made the chick, like all of that stuff plays out super well, especially at the end of the movie. Like rewatching the end of the first time, it just makes no sense at all. Like as a sensory experience, it's like this is what an action movie looks like, but I don't understand what's happening, which makes it interesting to view from a first time perspective as like some kind of weird commentary on how empty blockbusters are. And then the fact that it's just like this extremely elaborate form of like bootstrap paradoxes and like determinism and free will. And like it ends up being more than the sum of its parts. So yeah, there's the whole chunk of the movie where it causes me to become some kind of like rabid maniac, but
Posterity.
did you know that Tenet is a palindrome? And it's kind of like how the whole movie's like a palindrome, because he goes going backwards at the end.
You know what else is a palindrome?
Sit on a potato pan, Otis.
Arrival. Moving on. There's the suspiciously squinty eyes again.
We've only got 2 left now. Got about 40 minutes to do them.
If you're on a time frame.
Yes.
Okay.
There's no rush.
No, my bladder is rushing, but
you can take a break here.
No, there's nothing trickling down my leg. Interstellar comes next in 2014, and this
picturing Dougie Jones after he's chugged all those coffees and he's just sitting outside the bathroom.
The movement you just made.
That's what he does in the show.
This movie, actually harkening back to 2 hours and 22 minutes ago, the poem that I read at the beginning, it's prominently featured in this movie. The Dylan Thomases, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." I watched this movie twice in theaters. It has some like really, really strong emotional scenes in it. Most of them prominently feature Matthew McConaughey. Um, he does a pretty solid job in this movie, but this movie is about transcending time and space in a lot of ways. Hence the name of it. I don't know. I don't necessarily want to ruin too much of it, but yeah, it's an emotionally charged movie. It's by no means perfect. Um, I have had arguments with people around the movie, like they felt like it was anticlimactic, or they took issue with the science part of it, despite it making sense scientifically for the most part.
That's like the only part you can't. The only people who make fun of the science part are the people who listen to what's that asshole's name?
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, that guy.
Why? Why would those people take issue with it?
Because back in 2014 when this came out, Tyson was known for doing movie reviews, and he specifically did one for this movie where he's like, "Actually, that's not. I'm a physicist. That's not right."
Oh, this person's take was definitely just parroting that then. Yeah. And I was like, what? The movie does like seem to check out largely based on what we know.
So it was pretty damn accurate. It might have had some visual flaws, but that's because you can't show a fifth dimensional tesseract visually.
Right.
On a 2-dimensional screen. Who would have thought that you couldn't?
Why? Yeah, Christopher. Why didn't you do that?
You can't show.
Why didn't you? Why didn't you pass through my body with the musical notes?
I'm like Bane. I'm all shoulders. I don't.
I think anytime we record an episode that's over 2 hours, once we pass that that 120th minute, we enter the goofy stage.
I remember being goofy
troop.
about 20 minutes into this episode, but yeah, it's definitely getting a little more off the rails as we go. But
just glad I ate dinner already.
Oops.
Yeah, this movie does have some problems with it. I know you take issue with one line in particular. Which line is that again?
The one where Anne Hathaway just stares at the camera and says, "Love transcends space-time."
Yeah, that quote didn't really need to be said. It's far too on the nose of multiple people across generations. So, yeah.
I think this is an excellent movie. It was a phenomenal experience to watch in the theaters. Um, I don't particularly like the first hour of the movie at all. The kid actors are obnoxious. One of which is Timothy Chalamet.
How dare you attack? Yeah, Timothy.
He sucks in this movie.
He like doesn't look like himself now. Like he looks pretty much indistinguishable from how he looks now.
He's like a bird alien.
Now or then?
Yes.
Okay. He looks like I mean he's good looking, but he looks like a starved like stoat now. Anyway, yeah, he is in this.
Way to make fun of somebody for their body dysmorphia eating disorder.
Does he have that?
Clearly.
Sorry, Timothy.
He's thin as a pencil.
My apologies, Timothy.
You didn't hear me say a minute ago that he sucks at acting?
Yeah, but that's not making fun of his body dysmorphia. That's just his ability.
No, he's a good actor. Yeah, I don't particularly like the first hour, but once they get into space, things improve dramatically.
It's cool the way that he does this, which is reflected in Dunkirk, where he starts out on land and sort of builds it up from the land, and then you enter into flying and then into, yeah, like space. Like that part is cool. But yeah, it could have been done probably better. The build up, yeah, is somewhat lacking.
Oh, it just, like everything comes together well, and it's just frustrating that they didn't show like the downfall of Earth in a more interesting way, or they didn't show that Earth had problems in a very interesting way.
Yeah,
It's just like shots of a cornfield, and then you get shots of the
Casey
farmhouse.
Affleck
Yeah,
being
Casey
upset.
Affleck's terrible in this movie.
Yeah, he's like generic farm beard man who
Yeah,
burns things
yeah.
because daddy left.
Uh-huh. But yeah, all in all, great movie. I mean, Matthew McConaughey puts in an excellent performance. Jessica Chastain's really good in it. Ellen Bernstein in the like one scene she's in kills it at the end. Wes Bentley. Wes Bentley's good before he dies horribly.
Yeah, he's casually in it for a bit.
No, really, he's like I really like his character because he's like the go getter guy who's like I'm ready to do this. I'm gonna and just killed immediately because you always have to have one. Even what's his name, David Gyasi is
Mm-hmm.
really good in it.
Yeah,
Like just that one scene where they come back on board and they're like,
and he's like
"Hey, sorry,
snapped.
how long's it been?" And he's like, just stares at them for a few seconds. It's been 23 years. I was frozen for most of them, but not all of them.
Yeah,
And you're like,
yeah,
wow, I feel so bad for this dude.
yeah. That's like right after when they're on the planet and they're like, those are some tall mountains, and then they're like, those are waves, and you're just like, shit. And the music hits.
Wow. All right. I'm ready to move on to Dunkirk if you are.
My bladder is, yeah,
I offered you a chance to pause. We can still pause.
absolutely not.
Oh.
I wish I had more water to fuel up on. Reaches through the screen, takes the water.
Just casual video drone.
We should have planned that out where I had a jug under the camera and I just grabbed it, started drinking from it. We'll do that next time. We'll do some more visual trickery. Dunkirk is sort of a World War II triptych, I guess you could call it, where there's like it's like a triptych of like the warfare on land, water, and air of Dunkirk, a real place.
Yeah.
Because it's not really a triptych of characters, despite there being three. Not there. There's not really just three.
Characters are not important in this one.
Harry Styles is in it, but yeah, the people don't really
No, they're all
matter.
none of the performances in this movie are. I mean, maybe you disagree, but
What about Gilderoy Lockhart on the boat?
until you had
Good
mentioned
at
it earlier,
steering.
I'd forgotten that he was the captain guy in this movie. Honestly, the only character I actually felt anything for was the Mark Rylance guy,
The
the dude on
kid.
the boat. No, the old man on the boat who brings the
Yeah.
boats from.
Yes. Same. Same. I remember being confused because in watching it, I was like, wait, I'm not really feeling much during this movie. And normally in like a Christopher Nolan movie, at some point in time in the first act, he, you know, you're somewhat emotionally tethered to people. But yeah, I remember being surprised I wasn't, and then I felt something for that guy, definitely.
Yeah, this is one of those ones, because I do think there is a complaint of his movies and him as a like filmmaker, that he can get bogged down in technicality and lose track of the humanity.
Yeah.
In this one, that definitely happens, and I don't know if that's intentional, because it has been a
Right.
few years since I've seen this. This one is the one I've seen the least number of times and the least recently.
I
Um,
only saw it once, and I saw it in IMAX in Taiwan,
that's You did it correctly. Because this
surrounded
one,
by people that don't speak the same language as me and look completely different than myself. And to be clear, it did have subtitles. It had Chinese subtitles,
oh, okay.
which is kind of interesting because I'm watching a movie in a foreign country, but it's just in my language, which is really odd.
Yeah, this is I mean, part of the movie is like, English nationalism, because Dunkirk was a turning point of the war for the English.
Certainly.
Like them being able to rescue so many troops was like part of what turned the morale tide. And so that ending for me, I literally felt nothing. Like, I didn't feel relief when the characters made it to England. Like, I didn't like cheer like, yeah, the England. Like,
I felt something more from watching Tom Hardy look at the plane burn.
yeah, but that was mostly because I got just the image of the plane burning was powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed seeing them make it back, but I guess it was kind of like you knew it the whole time. I don't know. As war movies go, I usually don't enjoy war movies. Um,
This one will
I
probably,
enjoyed this one.
yeah, yeah. I mean, technically, it was incredible. Like, the stuff with the planes is unrivaled. Like, even by the Top Gun Maverick movie that came out this year, which is like a shockingly good action movie with like amazing practical effects with the planes. Like, even this movie puts that to shame.
Oh
And that was
shit.
probably like the best plane work I've seen in a movie since this one. Um, that doesn't necessarily bring in a lot of emotional weight, but um, like
Do you think this is better than Saving Private Ryan?
no, because that movie has its cake and eats it too. The ending is horrifically schmaltzy and corny. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but other than that bullshit at the end of that movie, um, it does a really good job of both putting you into a very documentary focused, like, this is what war is like just recreating war perfectly without
Yeah.
the R-rated bits, because um, yeah, by that point Spielberg was done making R-rated movies, and Christopher Nolan had been well past R-rated movies. Um, but yeah, other than that, it's like it feels more like a documentary than anything else. Like, it achieves like a certain heightened sense of realism about war. Um, but yeah, that's with Saving Private Ryan. I think it has those very real emotional pieces of like people being in war, but also just character work that this movie doesn't have. Um, so in that sense, I think I like Saving Private Ryan better.
Okay.
It's also been a long time since I've watched that movie. Um,
I'm not the biggest fan of Saving Private Ryan for
okay.
whatever reason. It could be that I'm just being a contrarian because a lot of people like it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would need to watch it again. Uh, I've seen it several times. I just find the pacing to not quite match.
I mean, the opening scene's awesome, but
Yeah,
then for me, since I've only seen that movie once, it's very spotty with like where things occur. Like, I remember the sniper scene really well. I remember the ending very well. And I think everything at the ending works except for the actual ending where it's young Matt Damon and then old man Matt Damon, and then it's me turning the movie off and going, fuck this movie.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Dunkirk, try to find the biggest screen possible and a really loud sound system.
Yes. Yeah, because this soundtrack is like, you need to have it loud. Like, if you're gonna watch this movie and you're gonna watch it on a phone or a computer screen, just don't watch it. You literally will not enjoy it. Like, it will not be good if you watch this on your phone. I can guarantee that. As someone who's watched Nolan's filmography on his phone, except this movie, because I know this one would just not be a good experience. That's why I've only seen it once. I haven't been able to, like, I don't really want to sit and dissect it on my computer.
All right, let's wrap this guy up. This was a fun ride. Certainly a director that I will continually keep going back to. I hope that Oppenheimer that comes out. I have hope for it. I really enjoy Cillian Murphy. Obviously, we both like Christopher Nolan, but I hope that the movie can both do justice to who Oppenheimer was, but then also do something else, which is something Nolan has continually been able to do, no matter what he's taking on. Yeah, an interesting undertaking after Tenet. But it may pay off because he may not get like all hung up on like the technical aspects of it, but maybe he'll get super hung up on the way the explosion unfolds.
Yeah, the bomb going off is going to be a 45-minute sequence.
Oh God!
Like the God of Light episode from Twin Peaks. Like, you know how it's like that's like 8 minutes or whatever. This is going to be 45 minutes of that. It just won't have the nice reprieve of God of Light at the end. It'll just end up being, Cillian Murphy or whatever saying, "I become death, destroyer of worlds."
So, what's your favorite movie by him?
Right now, The Dark Knight for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then The Prestige. I think those are both masterpieces. I think The Prestige is more perfect in a way, but the complexity that The Dark Knight gets to because of its increased budget, which is also where all the mistakes come from, add more to it, which gives me some more emotional response, I think, to the thing as a whole, even after watching it dozens of times.
Sorry, I was thinking. I just realized people were listening. Yeah, I was just deep in thought. I mean, I almost feel the opposite. Like, I like The Prestige because of its limited nature. You touched on this with the fact that it's a mid-budget movie. I think the movie would suffer if they had a higher budget. That's not the point.
Yeah,
That's not the point you were making. But I
no,
like.
it was basically. I just think there's more to The Dark Knight because of that. It's also 45 minutes longer or whatever, so there's more meat on those bones.
Yeah,
There's also more fat.
Yeah, but it's a fuller experience. Like, it's a fuller. I'm not gonna say cow. It's a fuller thing. It's a fuller thing, as opposed to The Prestige. The Prestige, to me, is just something that, like, I just love the magical aspect of it, and how magic is bridged with science, but then it's also just, well, magic and science are the same thing, and so is storytelling. So if you can trick. Like, if you can trick people for even just a moment to just believe in either themselves or something like that, you can get them to believe in something that is really powerful. And I really believe in that, despite it being like a pretty dark movie.
Yeah, that's a perfect description of The Dark Knight, I think.
both of them do involve flipping a coin.
No, I mean that's all. I think that's what makes Nolan good is that he's managed to kind of make the same movie over and over again.
Yeah, the
It's about
duality.
self-belief in the face of attempting to do something that you know you will probably fail to do while becoming something larger than yourself.
And the world that you are operating in is shite. But you can do something.
Except Dunkirk. Dunkirk doesn't really have any of those themes.
It's just super literal.
Yeah.
But yeah, the dual nature of the magicians, but also of themselves, I appreciate a lot. The Dark Knight, I see more as those three characters fighting with one another, and not through their ambition, but in their battle, they achieve something different than the Prestige does. In the Prestige's two battles between the magicians.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I think the Prestige is perfect. There's pretty much nothing I would change about it. The Dark Knight, there are a few things I would change about it, which is why I have the take that I do. But
No, same. I agree.
but I think
If you
I think I also just prefer, like, I just enjoy the Prestige more for whatever reason. But that's more subjective than objective.
if you caught me on a different day, I would tell you Memento.
Yeah.
Like if you just caught me in a bad mood or something. And I think on average, the Prestige might be my answer, but
No, I'm not trying to convince you of that. But Memento is beautiful in its limited budget, taking on the complexity that it has, taking on the complexity that it's trying to take on.
of all of his movies, Memento is one that feels like it belongs in the canon of like classic film, unlike any of his other movies.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
In its like its total crafting. Like there's something about the way it's all pieced together that feels like it feels like it deserves the little Criterion Collection ribbon or something. I don't know how to describe that feeling.
Yeah, that might have to do with when it came out as well and was produced. Any final thoughts on Christopher Nolan?
I'm vaguely looking forward to Oppenheimer, and definitely check out his movies, and don't watch them the way I frequently do, which is on my phone.
You monster.
It doesn't count. I've already seen them.
Yeah, enjoy. We hope you enjoyed this ultra marathon, if you will.
It took like 20 minutes. Oh, 2 hours, 43 minutes.
That'd be a quick marathon, probably.
I think the world record's like 227, 220 maybe. So this is like an okay marathon.
Christopher Nolan marathon. That's it. Adios.
Ciao. All right, yeah, I got it.